Have you ever noticed that no matter what a man does, how much love he gives, how stable he is, how loyal he stays, there's this lingering sense that for modern women it's never enough? That's not your imagination. That's not paranoia. That's the reality of the dating market today. And the truth is brutal. It's not because you're failing, and it's not because women are evil. It's because the world we live in has rewired what enough even means. 100 years ago, a man who could provide safety, food, and a roof was more than enough. A man who showed up, who stayed loyal, who worked hard, he was the dream. Women were satisfied because survival was the priority. But fast forward to now. Survival is no longer scarce. Security is no longer the rarest resource. What's rare now? Excitement, novelty, emotional intensity, attention that feels fresh every second. And when a woman has access to endless streams of validation from her phone, when she can scroll and find thousands of men liking her photos, commenting and chasing, then one man, no matter how good he is, starts to feel predictable. This is what most men don't understand. Women are not making choices in a vacuum anymore. Every single day they're immersed in a world where attention never stops. Social media has turned the average woman into someone who experiences the kind of validation that in the past was reserved only for celebrities. Imagine what that does to her psychology. If 10 men tell her she's beautiful before she even gets to work, how much weight do your words really carry? If she posts a selfie and gets 200 likes, how much impact does your single compliment have? Now, this doesn't mean women are malicious. It means their brains, just like ours, are wired for novelty. The human mind craves new stimulation, new highs, new peaks. But here's the catch: a long-term relationship is built on stability, routine, and consistency. See the paradox? The very thing a relationship needs to survive is the very thing that modern women are being conditioned to find boring. And when boredom sets in, dissatisfaction follows. Not because you failed, but because the system made enough impossible. You can see this everywhere. Look at dating apps. A woman can swipe right on dozens of men in a single evening just to see who matches back. It's not even about dating. It's about the thrill of options. Look at her Instagram. Each picture can trigger a flood of compliments, emojis, and messages. Even if she's in a relationship, she's constantly reminded that there are other men out there who find her attractive. It's like living in a casino, where every pull of the lever might bring a new reward. Do you really think one man, no matter how perfect, can compete with the psychological hit of endless attention? This is where men get crushed. They pour themselves into relationships. They try to be the rock, the provider, the nice guy who proves his loyalty. They think consistency will win her heart forever. But consistency in a world of stimulation doesn't excite her. And if all you bring to the table is reliability, you eventually become invisible. That's why so many men get blindsided when a woman they thought was happy suddenly checks out. They don't realize that while they were giving stability, her brain was craving novelty. But here's where the real problem starts. Men who sense this often try to fight it the wrong way. They start competing with the endless stream of attention she's already getting. They flood her with texts, compliments, gifts. They try harder, thinking more effort equals more attraction, but more effort just makes them look more desperate, and desperation is the quickest way to kill attraction. The more you chase, the more you reinforce the idea that she's the prize, and you're the pursuer. That's when her standards rise even higher, because if she already has you, why not see what else is out there? The only way to survive this new reality is to flip the frame, to stop thinking your job is to satisfy her endlessly, and start realizing that no woman in this system will ever be completely satisfied by just one man. It's not about you, it's about the environment she's in. You cannot compete with thousands of men online. You cannot outshine the dopamine rush of constant validation. And if you try, you'll only drain yourself while making her value you less. What you can do is become rare. You stop chasing, stop flooding her with what she already gets from everyone else, and start embodying the one thing scarcity has made valuable: presence. When a man is grounded, when he carries himself like he's already enough, when he doesn't crumble under pressure or beg for attention, suddenly he feels different. In a world where every man is trying to please her, the man who doesn't feels like a mystery, and mystery, more than effort, is what fuels desire. Think about how different the dating landscape looks for women today compared to even 2 generations ago. A woman used to meet men through her community, her family, her job, maybe through a handful of social circles. Options were limited, and that limitation created value. A man didn't have to be perfect, he just had to show up, prove he could provide, and commit. But now, with the swipe of a finger, a woman can meet more men in a week than her grandmother met in a lifetime. She can scroll through hundreds of faces, profiles, and messages without even leaving her couch. And that abundance has quietly changed what satisfaction feels like. It's not just about choice, it's about the psychology of choice. When someone is presented with too many options, the brain doesn't feel grateful, it feels restless. It starts to assume that the next option must be better than the one in front of them. It creates a constant low-level dissatisfaction, a sense that something is missing, even if the thing in front of them is good. This is what's happening in modern dating. Women aren't leaving good men because they're bad people. They're leaving because they've been conditioned to believe that something better might always be one step away. And this is why men feel so confused. They give loyalty, effort, stability, yet instead of being rewarded, they're often dismissed. Why? Because stability feels like certainty, and certainty is the opposite of stimulation. You can see this play out in subtle ways. A woman who once smiled at your consistency may later call it boring. The attention that felt comforting early on starts to feel smothering months down the line. She begins to pull away, not because she stopped valuing you, but because her brain is chasing novelty like a drug. This chase for novelty is intensified by the environment we live in. Social media platforms are designed to feed the human addiction to stimulation. Every like, every new follower, every message creates a dopamine spike. And when a woman is constantly bathing in those little hits of validation, she becomes less responsive to one man's steady affection. Imagine drinking energy drinks every single day. After a while, a glass of water doesn't feel refreshing. It feels bland, even though water is the thing your body truly needs. That's the trap modern women are stuck in. They're overstimulated to the point where healthy connection feels underwhelming. Men experience their own version of this trap too. The endless availability of explicit material, the rise of online fantasies, the lure of digital pleasure, it drains men's drive, their ambition, their ability to show up in real life with confidence. A man numbed by screens walks into a room with slouched shoulders, distracted eyes, weak energy, and whether he knows it or not, women can feel it immediately. They don't see his struggle, but they sense the lack of presence. On the other hand, a man who has cut himself off from those numbing cycles, who channels his energy into building his body, his mind, his purpose, he enters a room with a different gravity. He doesn't even have to speak for people to notice. That contrast is what makes him stand out, not desperate effort, not endless pursuit. So when we say modern women will never be satisfied with one man, it's not because they're broken, it's because the environment has rewired their expectations. Satisfaction used to mean stability. Now it means endless stimulation. And here's the brutal truth. One man cannot compete with the dopamine rush of constant attention from dozens of other men. Just like one healthy meal can't compete with the sugar high of junk food. When you frame it this way, it's obvious why dissatisfaction is inevitable. But here's where men go wrong. They see this reality and try to fight fire with fire. They play games, hold back affection, try to mimic aloofness in hopes of keeping her guessing. But pretending rarely works because women are far better at sensing authenticity than men give them credit for. If you're faking detachment, it will crack eventually. And once it cracks, she'll see you as just another man desperate for her validation. The solution isn't performance, it's transformation. That transformation starts with reclaiming your energy. When you cut yourself off from the cycle of lust addiction and validation chasing, you start to feel sharper. You're no longer drained by late nights lost in screens over reality. You're no longer desperate for quick hits of stimulation. Instead, you're rooted in presence, in discipline, in purpose. And that shift is what makes you magnetic. You stop being one of the countless men competing for her attention, and you start being the rare man who doesn't need it. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing her to be satisfied with you, when you stop building your worth around her response, that's when she starts to feel something different. She starts to wonder why you're not bending over backwards like the others. She starts to question whether she's good enough for you. That's the power of becoming rare. In a world drowning in abundance, rarity is the ultimate attraction. Think about it. Why are luxury goods valuable? Not because they're inherently better, but because they're scarce. Men who live in self-control, men who aren't constantly chasing women, men who aren't trapped by digital pleasure, that's the new scarcity. And when you embody that, you don't need to beg for a woman's loyalty. She gives it freely, because she knows she can't find another man like you scrolling through her feed. But the moment you forget this, the moment you try to compete with the noise, you lose. You can't out-text, out-like, or out-entertain the thousands of men already doing that. You win by stepping completely outside the game. You win by refusing to participate in the chaos. And when you do, something shifts, not just in her, but in you. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be noticed. You walk in knowing you carry something few men have. That quiet confidence is louder than any pickup line, any compliment, any display of effort. This is the essence of navigating modern standards. You stop trying to satisfy women in a world that has made satisfaction impossible, and you start living in a way that makes you unignorable. The men who thrive today are not the loudest, the richest, or even the most attractive by traditional standards. They're the men who refuse to be drained by the same addictions that consume everyone else. They're the ones who bring presence into a world full of distraction. And presence, more than anything else, is what cuts through the noise. Part of what makes this topic so powerful is when we ground it in real life. Because theory alone doesn't change how men see the world. You've probably seen it, maybe even lived it. A man who spends his nights drowning in digital pleasure, scrolling through online fantasies until his eyes glaze over, wakes up the next morning depleted. He walks into a room thinking no one can tell, but everything about him gives it away. His posture slumps, his energy feels weak, his eyes dart instead of holding steady. He speaks, but his words carry no weight. Women sense it instantly, even if they can't explain why. Compare that to a man who has reclaimed control of his desires, who has broken free from lust addiction. He's not wasting his drive on screens over reality. He's channeling it into discipline, fitness, ambition. When he enters a room, he doesn't even have to say much. People feel something different. Women notice the calm, the gravity, the presence. And in that moment, their standards aren't just about looks or money. They're about the intangible aura of a man who doesn't need to chase. This is where modern standards become a mirror. Women aren't simply judging you based on a checklist. They're reacting to the energy you project. Standards in many ways expose what you've been feeding yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually. A man who lives in cycles of depletion will never measure up to a man who carries himself with strength and restraint. And that's why so many men feel they're invisible, even when they're trying hard. They're showing up with the wrong energy. Now let's be clear, women aren't making choices in isolation. They're not sitting in a quiet room carefully comparing one man to another. They're swimming in abundance. Every like, every swipe, every DM reinforces the idea that something better is always one click away. Social media trains them to believe that attention is infinite. Dating apps reinforce the illusion that the perfect man might be just around the corner. So when you show up with good guy energy, thinking loyalty and consistency will make you stand out, you're mistaken. She already has an army of men doing the same thing, complimenting her photos, sending emojis, showering her with validation. That's the baseline. And the baseline never excites. The only way you stand out in that environment is by being different. Not louder, not more desperate, not more eager, but different in a way that's undeniable. And difference doesn't come from playing games. Some men think the solution is to withhold attention, to fake detachment, to manipulate her emotions. But performance always cracks. At some point, the mask slips, and she sees the insecurity behind it. That's why fake aloofness never works. It doesn't create respect, it creates confusion. The real solution is internal. It's the decision to stop chasing validation altogether. When you cut yourself off from the cycle of lust addiction and external approval, something changes in you. You're no longer showing up hoping she'll see you as valuable. You're already living like you are. That's when the dynamic flips. She's no longer asking, is he good enough for me? She's asking, am I good enough for him? And that shift is everything. But let's not sugarcoat it. Most men never get there. Most men live their lives paralyzed by silence. Think back to the moments where you wanted to speak, to approach, to act, but you didn't. You told yourself the timing was wrong, or she wasn't interested, or you weren't good enough. But the real reason was deeper. You were drained. You didn't have the energy, the presence, the groundedness to take that risk. And women feel that depletion immediately. They might not call it out, but they sense it. That's why so many women say things like, he's nice but, or I just don't feel it. What they're really saying is, I can tell he's not rooted in himself. This is why leaving lust behind matters so much. It's not just about morality, it's about presence. When you stop handing your energy over to screens, to fantasies, to endless cycles of craving, you suddenly find yourself sharper in conversation. You're more alive in your body. You listen better, not because you're trying, but because your mind isn't fractured. That aliveness doesn't just attract women, it commands respect from men too. Standards might feel like a cruel game stacked against you, but really, they're a test of whether you're grounded. You can't fake presence. You either have it or you don't. And here's the liberating part. Once you understand this, the bitterness fades. You stop blaming women for their standards and start asking whether you're living in a way that naturally meets them. Are you disciplined with your energy? Are you selective with your attention? Are you building a life that excites you without needing someone else to complete it? When the answer is yes, rejection stops stinging. You stop fearing whether you're enough, because you know the answer already. You become the man who can walk away calmly, not out of arrogance but out of clarity. And that clarity makes you the rarest kind of man, the one who thrives in modern dating instead of being crushed by it. Here's the paradox. Modern women will never be satisfied with one man in the sense that they're conditioned to crave infinite stimulation, but they will fight to keep the man who doesn't try to satisfy them like everyone else. They will hold on to the man who doesn't crumble, who doesn't beg, who doesn't compete with the noise. Because deep down, even in a world of abundance, what women truly crave is an anchor. And if you can be that anchor, you stop worrying about their standards, you stop chasing satisfaction, and you start living in a way that makes you undeniable. The deeper you look at modern dating, the clearer it becomes that this isn't just about women's choices, it's about men's responses. The truth is, women today are conditioned to always believe there's something better waiting just beyond the horizon. Technology has rewired attention, dating apps have multiplied options, and social media has created a constant stream of validation. But here's the paradox no one talks about. Endless choice rarely leads to lasting satisfaction. When you know you can swipe left and instantly see hundreds of new faces, commitment feels suffocating, not liberating. When you can post a photo and receive dozens of compliments, one man's attention feels less valuable. And when entertainment is always a click away, relationships often feel more like distractions than treasures. This is the battlefield men step into today. Not a battlefield of swords and shields, but one of perceptions, scarcity, and abundance. Most men, unaware of this dynamic, show up playing the old game. They try to be nice enough, stable enough, or supportive enough. They believe consistency is what will set them apart. But consistency in a world of abundance doesn't stand out, it blends in. That's why so many men end up shocked when they've done everything right, yet still get replaced, ignored, or ghosted. Because she wasn't comparing you to her last boyfriend, she was comparing you to an infinite carousel of options. And no matter how much effort you put in, if you don't rise above that noise, you'll always feel like you're not enough. But here's the truth that can change everything. Women's endless pursuit of satisfaction isn't something you can fight by giving more. It's something you win by giving less. Not less presence, not less respect, but less need. Because in a world where every man is competing for her attention, the one who doesn't compete becomes unforgettable. It's not arrogance, it's power. It's not indifference, it's self-possession. When you carry yourself like your time, your attention, and your presence are valuable, you shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, her question isn't how do I keep my options open? It becomes what do I need to do to keep him? This is why discipline with your own energy is so critical. If you're trapped in cycles of lust addiction, if you're wasting yourself on digital pleasure, if you're constantly chasing approval, you will always show up drained. And a drained man has no leverage in modern dating. But a man who channels that energy back into his craft, his body, his purpose, that man is magnetic. He doesn't need to beg for satisfaction because he already has it in his own life. And ironically, that's the man women will compete for. Even in a world overflowing with options. Think about it. A man who lives above the noise doesn't panic when a woman tests him. He doesn't flinch when she mentions another guy. He doesn't spiral when she pulls away for a week. He remains steady, rooted, calm, because his worth isn't tied to her reaction, it's tied to his standard. And that standard is what draws her in, again and again, because in a landscape where everything feels unstable, the man who is unshakable becomes priceless. But here's the challenge, most men won't do this. They'll nod along, agree with every word, maybe even feel motivated for a few hours, and then slip back into old patterns. They'll scroll through online fantasies instead of building real presence. They'll chase after women who barely respect them, instead of demanding respect first. They'll trade their power for scraps of attention, then wonder why they never feel chosen. And 5 years from now they'll look back, bitter and broken, asking why modern dating feels impossible. Yet some of you will take this message seriously. Some of you will decide that enough is enough. You'll step away from the noise, reclaim your energy, and start living in a way that naturally commands respect. You'll stop chasing women and start building yourself. And when you do, something incredible happens. You realize that modern women's dissatisfaction is not your problem, it's their reality. But when you live above it, you stop competing in a game you could never win, and instead you create a game where you're the prize. That's the ultimate truth. Modern women might never be satisfied with one man, but they will fight desperately to hold on to the man who doesn't need them, the man who can walk away, the man who lives in discipline, purpose, and self-respect, the man whose presence alone makes them question their own worth. You can be that man, but it starts the moment you decide to stop feeding distractions and start feeding yourself. And maybe right now, you're feeling that spark, that moment of clarity, where you realize you've been giving too much to the wrong things. Hold on to that. Don't let it fade like every other piece of advice you've heard. Let it push you to act differently. Because the man who takes action today is the man who transforms tomorrow. And if this message hit you in a way that made you stop and think, then make sure you stay connected here. Drop a comment, Share your thoughts and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Not because I'm asking for numbers, but because this is how you stay plugged into a message that can keep you grounded when the world is pulling you off balance. Hit the like button if this gave you value, and let me know below what part hit you hardest, because sometimes putting it into words is the first step toward making it real.